Happy Independence Day, everyone. I'm a bit late, but last night, on the 17th of August, I watched Soekarno, the 2013 movie. It's on Netflix. It's a biographical um, film about the life of our first president, Soekarno. I just kind of wanted to celebrate our independence in my own way, and it's to be less patriotic and more passionate about media, I suppose. I initially wanted to watch it because I watched Hamilton and I thought there's got to be an Indonesian equivalent, you know? We were in a revolutionary sort of, and we fought for freedom and stuff because we were colonialized. Yeah, but it's not Britain. Instead, it's the Dutch, and it's actually not the Dutch either because it's the Japanese. Those were the people that colonized us during World War II, I suppose. Anywho, I don't want this to be a very long podcast, so let's be brief. I got a whole page of notes. It's gonna be kind of a messy video. So obviously there's going to be spoilers if I'm going to be talking about it, but there's really no need to. Like if you've been in an Indonesian history class, uh, you know what happens. Like if you just read the Wikipedia page, you'll get all the info you need. The difference is you get to see the emotional side of things and be inside Sukarno's head and what he's going through. Like we're just kind of following through the story through his perspective, and I think that's a new take that I haven't seen before. Because if you read through a history book, you won't really get to see, for example, the harshness of Japan's rule over us during World War II. Like you won't see the slaves that we were forced to do during the forced labor camps in Ramusha and stuff. In this movie, it actually visualizes it, and you can see and feel what the characters are going through. If you want to know more about that, you can watch the movie for that stuff. And I guess I'll just give it a score. I think if I wanted to be nice, I'd give it like an 8 because as a film, it's pretty decent. I think it's as good as it could have been. There's no glaring issues, and it's decently engaging all the way through. Um, 7 to an 8, but if it's going from like personal enjoyment, I'll give it a 4 to a 5. It's not something that I'd really want to rewatch again because I kind of already know the story. That's kind of the spoiler-free section out of the way. Let's get to the beginning of the movie. We see a young Soekarno. He's trying to coax a young Dutch woman, and they almost get a kiss in, but one of the Indonesian superiors just like throws a shoe at him. That's pretty sick. He also says he's a Marxist, so that's cool. Well, okay, let's just get the facts out of the way first. He was young, and he was sick often, and that's why they named him Soekarno. Like they changed his name because of that. Now, I think the implications here is that it's kind of an interesting concept that the future leader of Indonesia need to be strong and independent, but physically he's actually kind of fragile and weak because of his sickness and his past. So I think that's a pretty good and great start. On that topic though, I feel like they could have pushed it in a bit deeper about because I searched up a bit more about him, and he actually kind of has like a somewhat eidetic memory or a photographic memory. That's why he was able to learn so many languages later on. Uh, he was also kind of a child prodigy in some way. This is just stuff that I got from Wikipedia, so you're gonna have to find your own sources on that, but I don't think it's false. I feel like they should have incorporated that. I don't think it'll make it a better movie. I just think they could have made him a more interesting character if they incorporated it. Like make him sort of more of a tragic person, or like he was destined to be the leader because of his, I don't know, psychological disorders or something. Gives him an edge, makes him unique. So besides that, we get this whole speech about if you control the people, you'll control the nation. He just kind of got that speech while riding a horse carriage. And yeah, that's really the biggest takeaway from the beginning of the film. That's how he knows how to be a charismatic person, which he uses for his speeches. And I think here's another tenet of the movie. And here's where I compare it to Hamilton again. So in Hamilton, there's this whole song where he wrote the Federalist Papers. It's a pretty iconic song, but I guess I'll remind you that Hamilton wrote like 70% of the entire paper. Just a majority of it. And it made the whole point of he's writing as if his life depended on it. So that's like his unique trait. That's why he was successful, I suppose. And it was a big emotional moment. So I think in Soekarno, throughout the whole movie, I was thinking like, what makes Soekarno special? Because I didn't get it at first, but now I think I understand that it's because he's a charismatic speaker. And they really did get the casting correct. The speech scenes, I think they're as good as they could be. Like when the crowd riled up, I didn't think it was weird for them to be riled up. I think they set up the shots and made the speech as impactful as they could have. So it works. It all works. And yeah, I guess that's my point. Like his main weapon is his charisma. Before we get on with the plot, I kind of want to talk about the actual film making itself. The first thing that I noticed was the coloring. It's all very sepia and yellow, and it's kind of boring, but if it wanted to be like a serious historical biography, I guess I'd understand why the colors weren't vibrant, because that wasn't the point, I suppose. The dialogue in the movie, I thought like it was decently engaging all the way through, and I understood everything that was going on. There's the way real people talk in real life, and then there's movie talking where they say things as seriously as possible. And this kind of hit a middle ground where they hit all the important points, but also had some everyday language into it. I think it did its job, but I think it could have been much more engaging if it went the movie route and made a bigger deal out of certain scenes, I guess. One thing that I didn't expect is the music. I think they did a great job with it. There's so many scenes with like actually emotional, orchestrated music. And it continued throughout the whole movie, like even in regular dialogue scenes. It knows when to be quiet sometimes, but it also knows when to add in a little motif. For example, anytime the Japanese generals spoke, they used like some kind of Japanese instrument, I think I'll play it right now. Yeah, that sounded very Japanese, and it kind of fit because he was on scene. Nice detail. The music was honestly probably a pretty big reason as to why the movie kept your attention all the way throughout. Like the music kind of carried you along because it was constant. It was pretty constant. Like there wasn't that many quiet scenes. Even in dialogue, there was music. I think it's ultimately a good decision, though. So yeah, I think we'll continue with the plot now. When the Japanese came into the country, Soekarno didn't fight them immediately. Uh, they actually agreed with whatever Japan was doing for a while. So, and I guess if I was in his position, I'd understand because I feel like if they tried to fight back, like Japan is one of the biggest superpowers in the world at that point, probably. And I mean, Indonesia has a lot of resources, but they're technologically not as advanced, and uh, they don't have enough structured manpower, maybe. So if they fought and they lost, they would have given over to Japan anyways. And after the war, it's not as likely that they would be given their independence. So Sukarno just had to agree with whatever demands they had. So he cooperated with their 3A propaganda plan, which then got replaced with some Indonesian Putra thing, which I'm surprised that Japan didn't react with at all. But whatever, I'm pretty sure I'm just missing my history. I didn't do well in history. Point is that because he agreed with Japan for a while, he had to deal with a lot of backlash from his own people. That's kind of the point of the movie. It wanted to give a bit more perspective on Soekarno's position. The Japan was just beating them uh, and oppressing them. Uh, Case in point, around the 1 hour and 10 minute mark, that was really the part where they showed their fascist, their I'm trying to find the word. It started with a D. Their dictatorship. Yeah, okay. Their ruthlessness and cruelty. They straight up slashed a guy and caused a riot just because one person was speaking out about Islam. And then we got to see Soekarno witness Romusha and the forced labor camps. That's really the point where it's okay, we can't cooperate with Japan because this is why. Because we won't really get our independence if they keep doing this. But he's in a bad position because he's forced to cooperate with them. Because if he doesn't, they can't really win in a fight. So yeah, not only is he being oppressed by them, he was also criticized by their own people for following along with them. And he had to deal with people literally throwing bricks at his windows and stuff. And then on top of all that, there's a whole romantic side to the movie where his second wife, Ingrid, was jealous that Soekarno was thinking about a teenage high school girl. That whole plot was a bit I'm not gonna say it was completely unrelated, but it did kind of feel like that, especially if they're fighting against Japan and political stuff. They had a whole big scene about their divorce. Um, Sukarno offered to do one last thing, which is to give a ride for her back to her home, basically. And yeah, it was kind of sad. Anywho, another thing about Soekarno agreeing to work with the Japanese is that I kept hearing about Indonesia fighting for our independence, and if they like just complied to everything that Japan did, I wouldn't say they fought for it. At the end of the movie, I realized that it is less fighting and more about smart decision making and doing short term sacrifices for their independence because, we saw the oppression they did. And Sukarno was kind of like the only one that was thinking long term. And in the end, we did get our independence. So he was right in the end, but there were a couple of other people. I don't really remember their names, but they wanted to basically proclaim their independence much earlier before like uh, Japan giving them their independence. And Sukarno just like said, hey, let's wait, let's be smart about this and do the safe option. And I think that's great. So, kind of a lot of the movie also focuses on trying to fix the issue of Indonesia itself. Like, they explain that it's a very diverse country. There's a lot of tribes and there's a lot of islands with their own traditions and races and religions. So they're trying to figure out how exactly are we going to unite all of them because we're all in one general area, you know? We gotta make a nation out of it and be freed from Japan. I think, funnily enough, because of our colonializers, it actually made us unite because of this one um, enemy, basically. We all unanimously, even though we were all different and we all might have not liked each other, we at least all unanimously hated this one entity or this one colonializer. It used to be the Dutch and now it's the Japanese. So yeah, I guess it's kind of a miracle that our archipelago, our nation of islands with all these different people are united. This is where we get to the courtroom scene, where they're trying to figure out how is Indonesia gonna be governed. Is it gonna be a monarchy or is it gonna follow Sharia law? One guy really was going for the Islamic route because we are mostly an Islamic country. But I think the way that Sukarno handled the situation was actually really smart. He ended up with the Pancasila, which are the five tenets of Indonesia, I suppose. I actually thought it was very good outside of the box thinking, not just to follow one thing, but to make its own rules and really think about what the ideals of our nation are. And the way that the movie showed this is to show scenes we already saw that are in the movie. So, for example, point 4 about social welfare, it showed a lot of sick and poor people in poverty just on the streets that we already saw in the movie. And I think that's a great way of showing what the tenets of Indonesia are. And it did the same with believing in God because everyone is already pretty religious, so it fits. And then there's also the whole, just the point 3, the discussion democracy thing. And it showed in previous scenes many people were in one room trying to decide on a decision. So it worked out. I think the Panchasila really was the only natural way that multiple points or ideologies are actually needed for this diverse country. Like, it can't just be democracy, it can't just be about having a religion. It's gotta be all of these things. And yeah, that part was probably my favorite part of the movie. Because the Panchasila part, like, made me really rethink about what the ideals of our nation was and how it fit so well. One last good point. One scene in the car, Hatta pretty much just asked Soekarno, let's say we do get our independence, what are we gonna do? Like, are you sure you can lead this country? And that reminded me of that one of Hamilton again, where they won the war, but how are they gonna lead it? Like, winning is easy, but governing is harder, you know? And it's a shame we didn't really get to see that part in the movie. Like, the movie ends right after they get their independence, which is fine if that was the scope of the movie, but in Hamilton we got to see a whole lot more. We got to see it until Hamilton died. But this one we didn't. But yeah, it's great that, like, it really set in the point that independence is just the beginning. You know, after that, they actually have to run the whole country. So, I don't know, one more good point. There's Oppenheimer in this one. As you know, in 1945, the bombs got dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And, you know, Oppenheimer came out kind of recently, a whole month ago, practically. But I don't care. Oppenheimer, bro. He might have not been the main reason why Indonesia got their independence, but probably a pretty big reason. They kind of lost. Yeah, you know what? They kind of lost. They surrendered after the bombs got dropped, and that's probably what made them move back from Indonesia. So thanks, Oppenheimer. Okay, now I'm gonna have to get into the flaws. This movie, even though I gave it an 8, and I think it did the best it could do, I still think it did some things, it handled some things off. And I'm no historian or anything. First of all, and this is kind of a minor complaint, but when it came to the narration, just bits and pieces throughout the movie, they were too lazy to actually come up with a way to make the progression of time interesting. So instead, they put text on the screen saying, here's the part where Japan invaded Indonesia. They already went through Philippines and Singapore and stuff. And it was just text on the screen with like a historical song in the background and historical footage. I honestly think experientially they were kind of cool and they looked interesting, but I still want to say it's lazy film writing. They could have shown it through dialogue, and they didn't have to put in these awkward moments that stopped the pacing for a second. Like, if this is supposed to be seen through the eyes of Soekarno, why not just let us hear the news from Soekarno's perspective? Like, he heard it from this person, and that's how he knows it, you know? That's a way you could present that Japan invaded Indonesia at the time, and it would have fit with the rest of the movie, and it didn't need to pause it with unneeded text on the screen. The next thing is I already knew going in that this was basically Indonesian propaganda, and let's show how great Soekarno is, and let's show how much we fought for our independence. And there were definitely a few scenes where it was called for example, the proclamation scene that I said I really liked. I think that was worth the time to slow down, have some epic music in the background while he reads the proclamation. But I think some scenes it went a bit overboard. Like the part where they wrote the proclamation the night before. Um, that was a very slow scene as well. It was supposed to give off the idea that, oh, here's where our nation was born, in this very room with these very important people. Soekarno, Hatta, and Soebarjo, they were all talking to each other, and they wrote that thing. They made our nation on that piece of paper. And there's some even more gratuitous shots of Soekarno. He was sleeping on his bed right before the proclamation, and then his wife just came in with the white suit and the tie, and they were putting it on him. And the whole scene lasted for like 2 minutes longer than it was necessary. Like he was fucking Iron Man or something putting on a suit. It was too long. It was too propaganda like. I didn't like the filmmaking or the cinematography in that part. They really were shorter than I make them out to be, but it was still kind of ostentatious for what it was. And yeah, here's my last complaint with the entire movie. I gave it an 8 out of 10, but I don't think it has its own identity. Um, I'm trying to word this in a way that doesn't seem too critical or like mean, but there's nothing particularly unique with the way that it presented its ideas, I suppose. Like, as I said, it was all in completely sepia or had a yellow tint to it all. And neither was the cinematography or the way the shots were made were super special or interesting. Like, no scene was memorable or really jumped out at me. Again, I don't want to say it's bad. It's just not like that special. It was a very functional film, I suppose. Again, for what it is, it's pretty good. But whenever I watch anything, from the Americas or like American TV shows or American movies or films, there's always something special or unique about them makes it memorable, and I want to watch it again. And of course, I'm a complete weeb. All those Japanese animes, they have such interesting ideas, and the way they're directed is super interesting as well. When it comes to Indonesian entertainment, I still believe it's in its fledgling era. It's still trying to have its own identity, and sometimes the identity that we do have that makes us special isn't very good. Like the thing that I'm thinking of is soap operas for some reason. I should really watch this movie. I think it's called Laskar Pelangi, and it had a really cool, good song, and that made that movie pretty special and unique. But Soekarno doesn't really have that. Like I said, the music carried things along, and it was pretty good, but none of the tracks were memorable. So yeah, I guess that's my verdict. 8 out of 10, very functional. And it actually had some emotional scenes, like the divorce and the Panchasila scene. I think it really was able to show Soekarno's life and the struggle that Indonesia had to go through to get its independence very well. But in its execution, I felt is a bit lacking in identity. The execution is fine, but it's not like awe-inspiring or amazing. I feel like that really was the step that would make it from pretty good to like actually amazing or great, like a film to be remembered by. So yeah, a pretty good movie. One more thing while I was sort of researching for this video, um, there was where he mentioned a part about prostitutes, and I thought the reason why Soekarno wanted to bring prostitutes to the village was so that the Japanese could steal those women and sacrifice them instead of their women and children and men, basically. But I don't think that's the case. In any case, I researched on that and I still don't know why he did that, but I was able to find that his sixth wife, Dewi Soekarno, I think, was Japanese born, and she's actually kind of a prominent figure, and I believe she's still alive as of the time I'm recording this. The most interesting thing that I wanted to say about her is that she was actually a voice actress in an Idol anime, Idol Time Prepara, as like the older sister of some evil woman, basically villain of the week. I love that. I just love that fact. I find it so funny that Sukarno's sixth wife is a seiyuu for some idol anime. I'm definitely gonna watch that. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about the movie Soekarno. Hope you enjoyed this. Happy Independence Day. Goodbye.